My name is Jason Hall, and I am the president of Slow Roll Detroit. What was it growing up like in Detroit, man? You know, I always think about it, and I always have sort of the same memory, but it wasn't the same time of the summer. It always seemed like it was summertime. You know, I just remember being in my neighborhood, and at that time, having friends in every house on the block. You know, every house that had a kid, you knew that kid. You either hung out with the kid, you rode bikes with them or something, but I had this memory of Detroit, and what always comes up is this massive memory of community. You know, whenever I think of what I do and why I do it, it's always trying to bring Detroit back to where I visioned it being. You know, man, you know, the 80s were a crazy time, so I remember growing up in the hip hop era where, you know, everybody wanted nice things, but then at the same time, everybody wanted your nice things. So another memory was definitely, you know, getting nice stuff and running home. You know what I mean? So I mean, it was school, it was hanging out, it was fashion, it was hip hop, it was discovery, it was, you know, I just remember like the actual block I lived on seemed like such a microcosm of the world, you know, at that time. It seemed like if you went outside that it was like a whole different place. And so that's what I remember about Detroit too. It was just like, the block was almost like an island, you know what I mean? And I remember being so proud to be from what street I was on, and everybody on the other street, you know, they were proud of what street they lived on. I mean, Detroit is just, these are the memories that I have, are just fun times, but you know, good and bad times, you know, definitely. I remember when we first got bars on our house, you know, because you had to protect yourself, you know, so you had things like that. But it all seemed so good at the time. You know, I remember like hearing about crack. I remember hearing about crack, like, and being confused because I didn't know what any of it was. But it hit so hard that it was just like, boom. It was like you were talking about crack. You were talking about running from crackheads. You were talking about, and so I remember that time definitely. And Detroit's always been that place. Like I said, there's good and bad. So yeah, there was a lot of, we had to protect ourselves at home. You know, you definitely had to look out for your family. But you know, those times to me just seemed like regular times, like that was the regular way of life everywhere to me. I didn't know it was singularly Detroit, or if it wasn't at that time, I just thought everybody was going through that at the same time. What I remember hearing was that it was a time of taking back. You know, that's what I heard. It wasn't, the way, no one talked about it like, I mean, we all knew it was devastating and bad for the city, but the way my family talked about it is the city had reached a boiling point, and everything is always gonna reach that tipping point. And we had reached that point where points had to be made. I come from an activist family, and so that's the way they looked at it. Like I said, they knew that it was a bad thing that happened to the city, but almost sometimes, you know, you grow up and you know there's time for revolution, and sometimes it manifests in certain ways, and that was the way it was done. And so that's how I grew up hearing about it, is that it was a time for people of color to speak out against the injustices that were done against them. And unfortunately, that's sometimes the answer. You know, what really took me away from Detroit, it was a mixture of needing to advance in the position that I was in, the job that I was in. They didn't have any, I had reached my ceiling there, so I had to leave to get a better, you know, better education on my field. But at the same time, yeah, man, I was burned out. I was really, and for lack of a better phrase, falling out of love with Detroit, man. You know, it was just, it seemed like the vibe here was just something that I wasn't into, man. I was working in a place with people who weren't from here, but were constantly in charge of giving the information about here. So like their angle would be negativity. And when you work in a field like that, man, it just weighs on you. So I had to go. I mean, I just, there was nothing here at that time for me. You know, it was just a dead end wall. And I felt like for my own personal growth, I had to get out of here and see what, I was so in love with Detroit till that moment that I refused to see anything else, you know what I mean? So I needed to step away and see what I was missing. Miami, I went to South Beach, Florida. I worked at a TV station down there. for a year, about a year and a half. I hated every minute of it, because the minute I realized it wasn't Detroit, I just couldn't deal with that. I feel like if you grow up in Miami, or that's your life, that you can deal with that. But if you're from Detroit and you like come from a place of, like I said, hard work, and nobody's going to the gym at 5 a.m. unless they have the time, because we're working, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's where I went to Florida. Oh man, I found immediately, what I found was the love that I had been missing, because I ran into all the people that I left, and all of them were saying, "Where have you been? And why aren't you here? And how can we get you back into work? And how can we get you?" That's what I first of all, I missed the massive amount of love that I had here, because something about South Beach was just so sterile. Everybody's like a transplant, so there's no heart in South Beach. No disrespect to them, but I felt like there was none of that there. But when I got home, I felt the love, and then I found the city that I thought I fell out of love with. I just, like I said, I just needed a break, man. As soon as I got back, I just knew that this is where I was supposed to be, and this is where I was gonna be. Slow Roll came about because we were, Mike and I, who started it together, Mike McCool and I, we were hanging out a lot together, and then Mike wasn't really working at the time, and I was getting my hours cut at Channel 4. And so I was going through another one of those falling out of love kind of spells with the city. And a couple friends of mine, Karen and Kelly, who own the Wheelhouse, said, "Jason, man, you should start riding a bike and just seeing the city, because you're down on Detroit, but get in the city." So I rented a bike from them, and within like a week, I just felt this amazing energy coming from people, and something about being connected to the city again on a different level. And so Mike and I just started riding bikes a bunch, and there were bike rides that already existed in the city, but we didn't really click with their vibe. They disrespected the city. They didn't care about rules. Listen, there's something to that. That's a protest. That's what they do. But we decided that we would start something for ourselves and our friends, and remind people to slow down. Because really for us, we felt like people needed to see what we were seeing. And so the only way to do that is to get them out of their cars and get them on bikes. And once you're riding a bike with somebody, you're gonna have a conversation. If you are riding next to somebody and you don't, you're a robot. So the quality of conversation that you have on a ride is sometimes incredible when you ride for hours together. So we decided to start this ride and call it Slow Roll. And we never had the intent on it being this massive movement. We just wanted to make something for us, so we could ride with our friends and family and see the city at a different light. But then once people started to come to, we always have this joke. We say, "You're going the wrong way." If we're going this way and we see a stranger going the other way, we say, "You're going the wrong way." And so one day I said that to a guy named Hal Williams, and Hal turned around, started riding with us. And so it didn't really dawn on me who Hal was until maybe the third or fourth week. Then I said, wait a minute, I'm riding bikes with this 60-year-old black guy that I never would have met any other way than on this bike. Over the last 3 to 4 weeks, I've got to know this man. We've changed tires together. We've been in the trenches just in a month. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy to think about how easy it was for me to let go of any barrier that we had just because we rode bikes together. And so that was it for me. I try to put my finger on it all the time. There's a million different things. I think what it is people really, at the core of what they are, they want those barriers to be down already, and the bike and the ride just makes it easier to say, because sometimes it's hard to say, "Hey man, let's just be friends." There's so many parameters set up that or we're nervous, but once you get out on that bike, you forget being an adult almost. I call it the kid syndrome, because the minute somebody gets on a bike, the first thing they do is they go, "Wee!" And they really do. They really forget everything that's going on in their life. And when you're a kid, you get along with everybody at that time because you haven't built those walls. So I think you kind of revert back to like being a little bit of a kid. And like I said, Detroiters and people from Metro Detroit, you know, the outside wants us to believe that there's this thing, you know, but in reality, there isn't. We just keep that facade up. Everybody out there wants to hang out with everybody down here, and everybody vice versa. And this bike ride just makes it easy for people to do. I really think it's just the fact that once you forget you're an adult and your problems, you can focus on living. That's what it does. Last year I met a firefighter, his name's Daryl Tucker. He came up to me and he was, you know, gives me the same line that I hear all the time, and I'm not discrediting it. This line is awesome, but he said, you don't know how many lives you changed or how good this is. And I said, well, you know, you tell me your story, because everybody's got one. And he's talking about a firefighter who weighed 450 pounds. And I said, okay, what's that got to do with me? And he goes, well, this guy came out on slow roll. First of all, 450-pound guy came out on slow roll. And he's like, he came out and started riding with his friends just because it's slow and wanted to hang out with his friends. A summer later, he was 50 pounds lighter. He didn't realize he was exercising while he was hanging out with his friends. And so he's like, you understand how many firefighters are kind of overweight these days? Because really what a firefighter does is wait. You know, that's their job, is to sit in the house and watch TV and wait for that alarm to go off. So they're eating 3 meals a day, you know, they're hanging out, and they have a tendency to lose track of their weight. So all of a sudden, he's like, we're gonna introduce this program with the firefighters where we're gonna get them out on slow roll, and we're gonna start doing a charity event where we'll pledge how many miles, and then we'll put money in the firefighters fund. And I'm sitting there blown away how this one person came out on this ride and had affected so many people just through his weight loss. And what that's one story. I got another story, a guy named Carlos that rides with us all the time. He actually is on our squad. Our squad is the inner team that keeps the ride moving. They change tires, they make sure no one gets left behind. Well, Carlos comes up when I first met him and he said, you know, I'm on dialysis. And he said, I go to dialysis every Monday. And he said, if I don't ride my bike, I can't move. He's like, the chemo will sit in my system and I'll be so sick. So he's like, I have to do slow roll because it keeps me alive. You know, I mean, when you hear something like that, I'm about to, you know, every time I tell that story, I'm like, geez, man. I mean, that's why you do what you do. You know, we used to do it because it was fun, but now we do it because it's fun and it's changing the world. And so those are just a couple of the stories, man. I mean, I've had kids come out on the ride that I've watched grow up. You know, we've been doing this for 6 years. So I've had kids go through high school. I've had kids start riding bikes with us, and now they ride for their college bike team. Seriously, like, that's pretty crazy. Everybody comes out. And I mean that, you know, a long time ago when we used to get 100 or 200 people used to say, man, that's everybody who rides bikes. We get 5,000 people a week. In order to get that many people, everybody's gotta come out. And so there's no one person. You're gonna see black, white, young, old. We get people from overseas. We get people from Asia. I mean, we get people, and it's so crazy when people come to me and they say, we came from Japan to ride slow roll. And I'm like, wait a minute, no, you came to Detroit because you had something going on and you rode slow roll. And they're like, no, we came to ride slow roll. And I'm like, wow. I mean, once again, that's the power of Detroit, man. Like, that's what I get proud every time. I'm like, my city did this. So yeah, man, we get them from everywhere. You know, we joke around and we call it the motorless city now. You know what I mean? We're still putting them on wheels, but now you've got Detroit Bikes, Shinola, 313 Bicycle Works, 313 Bikes. You've got so many different companies now that are actually manufacturing American-made product in Detroit. And that's crazy to me. You know, I've talked to people who are like, my idea is to put a bike assembly line in an abandoned Ford factory or something like that. Wouldn't that blow your mind if we converted a car factory into a bike factory? That'd be insane. The balance needed to reach people. I think if the first thing you have to do is you have to be passionate, you have to be real. Like, that if people looked at me and they thought I was contrived about my passion and my love for the city, it wouldn't work. So what I think what first sells this is the passion for wanting to make this place a better place. So I think that's part of it, man. And then the other part is being willing to let people take ownership. Okay, it's not my ride, it's our ride. And so once people understand that and take that pride in something, then that's really what brings people out. I could stand out all day on a corner and say, come ride Slow Roll, but it takes the people going out and championing their ride. They're going to work and they're saying, you gotta come ride my ride, man. We ride, and they don't say there's a ride that happens every Monday. They say, we ride every Monday. Come ride with me and my friends and my family. And then they get there, and all of a sudden, they get to talk to all these people in front of these people that have never seen them be out of their shell, and it just exponentially grows. So once you attach ownership, that's really for us, that's what made this thing happen. One of the major things we change in people's minds is that even the perception that just because a neighborhood looks a certain way, that the people that populate it aren't that necessarily reflective of that. Okay, so for example, when we take them through a quote unquote bad neighborhood, they're expecting something to happen. But when people come on their porches and start applauding them and thanking them for coming through their neighborhood, they're like, wait a minute, these people aren't over here because they want to be in this neighborhood, in this situation. They're over here because they live in this neighborhood, or they grew up in this neighborhood, but there's still a certain pride. And so that's the first thing, is like that right there. Then people can go home and they can say, wait a minute, at least think to themselves, I probably shouldn't be over there at night, but these people are still good, genuine people who want a better way of life, just like me, and that's that thing right there is, man, and then the other is when you see the mixture of races, you got African Americans who are very pro-African American, and you got suburbanites that are very pro-Trump. And when you put them in the pot together, it doesn't matter, it does not matter. So, those things right there are really what Slow Roll is in its essence, is a mixture of everything and everybody.